Hi everybody, welcome back to the Chasing Psychological Safety video series.
Hi, hello.
Today we're going to be talking about communication and psychological safety, and having, just a chat to introduce how effective communication can be in building psychological safety in teams.
It's obviously crucial. If you don't have open communication and a good channel, a good lasting channel, then it's very difficult to get any kind of safe, secure teams. What we found is, in a more structured fashion, we were just putting together things that we have seen in various teams we work with. So there are some characteristics that all of these teams have in common when it comes to communication. They seem to be very open, and we've observed empirically that they are less politically correct and encumbered by language than other places. There's a lot less wooden language. People tend to use plain English. They might throw a swear word in there if it's colorfully needed. And so we find that there's a lot of humor in open communication in teams that are psychologically safe, and that's really good to hear. It binds people together. We also find that people are very intentional about seeking this contact and having the frequency of the meetings in place. They're obviously comfortable with each other. There's a sense of picking up each other's, finishing each other's sentences and having camaraderie and having that kind of close-knit sense of good engagement within the team that we're going to talk about in another video. There's a good amount of healthy conflict. And maybe the most important element of it all, before I throw it back to Fionn to ask her a question about something, is that we find consistently emotionally invested in each other and really, really empathetic and kind and open and consistently compassionate towards each other. They remember they're humans and they react that way. But what about, one of the things we were seeing consistently is that these people in good, solid psychologically safe teams are at ease with the type of channels they're using for communication. If you wanted to kind of talk about that, Fiona.
Yeah.
That's important.
It's a topic of particular interest to me. We've been talking, I work with a lot of teams. A lot of those teams are located in different places now, potentially located in different places around the UK, potentially located in different places around the world. But, and we also have this culture which pervades nearly everywhere we work now, of flexible working, which is a fantastic thing. But it does necessitate being able to communicate in a lot of different ways. And I think I love the way Jenny just put that, being comfortable with many different communication channels and the communication channels that we're using is really important now, that as leaders and as teams and as psychologically safe teams, we get really comfortable finding and co-creating the right ways to communicate for us. And being really comfortable with the idea that communicating across a wide range of different channels can build trust in the same way as face-to-face, as long as we place the right amount of focus on being human, being compassionate, and being empathetic in those communication channels. They can be everything you're using. So it can be a face-to-face, great. That's what everybody traditionally focuses on, right? And it's awesome. But we can also have fantastic, trusting, safe conversations across Slack, across MS Teams, across any of the tech that you're using to communicate with each other over the phone. Putting the video on whenever you're using your technology. Dwayne knows that's one of my tips, bugbears, whatever you want to call it for people. But really, co-creating that together. So saying as a team, what are we comfortable with? What can we really use to build trust and to build relationships and to have healthy conflict in whatever conversation we're having? Be really relaxed and innovative about how you create those communication channels, short, sharp communication bursts regularly, hour-long team meetings if that's what you want, but make sure the agenda works for you and you've co-created it together. But just being really comfortable in using a wide range of channels that work for you as a team. I think from a communication point of view now, we need to start embracing a world of difference in communication.
And I'd like to be honest and address that and say that I mean, these are some of the things that we are struggling with and discussing and being challenged with ourselves. We are a young startup. We're located in all corners of the world. One of our ambitions is to never pay fixed rent anywhere. So we will always be kind of faced with the idea of how do we communicate best. And we also employ loads and loads of developers who, like yours truly, are uncomfortable with being on video all the time, and it, to some people, it doesn't come natural that they have communication in any other fashion than face to face, and sometimes it's challenging and sometimes it's not your personality. But I think what's really important is to find, as Fionn was saying, that sweet spot that works well for the entire team. Because look, if your team can only ever communicate in writing, if you can function by sending notes and like tie a little bit of a, if you can scribble it on the bark of trees, and that's what works for you, and do that. But realistically, you're going to need to find a method of communication that's going to be one of these modern ones, and they will involve as many of the senses as you possibly can. Just find things that you're comfortable with, and make sure that the channels are multiple and open and fit for your purpose. But coming back to, and I think it ties nicely into the idea of, we have, the one thing we have to do, irrespective of channel, irrespective of frequency, irrespective of swear words, irrespective of content and conflict, is to remind ourselves at all times that we have got to treat the people in our team as other humans that we comprehend, understand, and care about. And I think a culture of caring about those around you is something we can and should start working towards. There are ways in which we help teams today think about it. There are some teams that would be, maybe, hopefully, from what we've seen, open to the idea of creating mindfulness, of working on their compassionate selves by understanding, kind of commonality of suffering and how much of a human the other people are. But I mean, there are multiple ways in which we can increase those. Have you seen anything in that regard of people successfully building?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had some really interesting conversations around people being able to build empathy. Some people saying it's not something you can develop, and other more potentially successful leaders actually having said, I've really worked hard on this and it's paid huge benefits. So I was working with somebody at the moment, actually, and we were talking about empathy, and they said that about a decade ago they'd done a particular personality tool, and it had revealed to them that they were naturally very low on empathy, or certainly that was the style they were using as a leader at that time. Mm-hmm. And talked about lots of great examples in conflict situations in particular, where it just had gone straight for the write the nasty letter approach, as opposed to the human reach out and find out how we can collaborate and communicate and understand each other's points of view. But once he had this experience of understanding and reflecting on low empathy, and then having some coaching, he spent the last 10 years working really hard on building that as part of his leadership practice, and it's paid dividends. The most recent project was several billion that he was leading in terms of value, and much more successful as a result of using empathy as a leadership behavior, with not just the internal team, really importantly, but external teams as well, all of the stakeholders, the people, the contractors, subcontractors, and the clients as well. So definitely something that you can work on, and there are specific steps you can take towards working on that.
And it's worth almost developing a program of team self-improvement, if you wish, where you continuously return to this other person is a human I'm invested in, and a human I work with, and we do well together. In fact, we do some of this work in our workshops, and we've done some experimental work over the few months that has been, I think, very interesting. And what we found is that there's a hunger and a gap for people to to feel with compassion and relating and humanness and emotions. And once you accomplish that, and if you manage that spark, it seems to kind of take a life of its own, and people comprehend the value of stepping away from a heated situation or a wall of professionalism and stepping into, we are both or all 5 or 10 of us humans, and we're all creating something together, and we will intently remember to be kind to each other and empathic.
Yeah, and there are some great tools that can be used to affect that in teams.
Right. So I think that's kind of key. If we want to communicate, if we want to remain psychologically safe, we have got to work on our empathy. It's probably our biggest weapon, and it's going to take us far. We do measure it in leaders. There's an actual, in our software, there's an actual dial there that tells you how much empathy you have as a leader, because it matters. We don't measure it in teammates, but you guys will know the value of it once you start being intentional about empathy. So ask us for tips. We'll tell you all we've learned, and of course, happy to come in and work with your teams if you like us to. Thank you so much for listening to us again. We'll talk to you next
week. Thank you. Great. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.